Welcome to the Optimized Equine Podcast. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Tessa Nicolet of Cohesive Horsemanship to the show. Tessa is first and foremost a student of the horse, a philosophy that shines through in everything she does as a trainer, clinician, and working equitation judge. Through her thoughtful approach to training, Tessa helps riders develop deeper understanding and connection with their horses. Her methodology blends classical principles with practical application, creating balanced partnerships built on mutual respect and clear communication, the cornerstones of what she calls cohesive horsemanship. Tessa is easy to love, and I'm sure you'll love the episode. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, welcome Tessa. Thank you so much for joining me today. To start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your journey with horses and how that evolved into the training and the educational work that you're doing with Cohesive Horsemanship?
Yeah, I don't know if we could start from way back.
Okay,
Or we
let's
can
do it.
start,
I think that's where
it's like,
the interesting stories come
yeah,
from. Let's start way back.
okay, let's go way back. So I'm going to
Yeah.
start from way back. So, um, I was a pain in the butt as a kid and I was obsessed with horses. And so I think I was 4 years old when I finally begged and pleaded enough that my mom took me to the local pony club and had a meeting with the two lead instructors. And this was in Switzerland. I'm originally from Switzerland, so this was in Chavannes-des-Bois. And I remember being pretty terrified. Like, I remember that little piece where I was like, these women are very intimidating, but I wanted to ride. And they were asking me to explain why a 4-year-old should be allowed to join Pony Club when the rule was that you had to be 5. And so I made my case. I don't even remember what I said. All I know is I was terrified. and, and they let me start. And so I started taking lessons once a week, and it was the highlight of my week every time to go and do my Pony Club lessons. But to be totally honest, I was also scared. Like, I loved horses, I loved being around them, but at the same time, I was just a little bit scared of them, if that makes any sense. But anyway, so that's how it started. And then my dad decided that he better get a horse if he wanted to spend any time with me. So he ended up getting in horses from there. And then kind of things evolved and my parents separated and all the things. And my stepfather then joined the scene, and he was a big reiner. So he was European champion reining for many years. And so I got into that piece of things. So I was at the pony club doing jumping and doing the things that pony club does. And then on the weekends, I would go to the other barn, which was actually just down the street, and ride Western and learn about reining horses and that kind of thing. And we moved on from there. Then we moved to the United States. We moved to DuBois, Wyoming, from like right outside of Geneva, Switzerland, if you can kind of picture that. And so the culture shock was, even as a young kid, it was pretty impressive. It was just such a different place, but I had horses, and DuBois, Wyoming had horses. So as long as I had horses, things were fine. And so then...
And what age were you then when you came to the United
11.
States? Okay.
11 when we moved, yeah. So, I spoke English, but I didn't read or write in English. So I was put in the special ed kids room, for a long time. And that served me very well. I probably should still be there, but it was a great experience as far as the people in DuBois, Wyoming were just super special, super cool people. But horses were my way out of like the hard family life that we had and that kind of thing. It was kind of my escape. It's where I learned to be me. It's where I learned about myself the most. And so I really credit horses with being the reason that I'm okay in my brain, I think. Most of the time, some of the time. It does, I don't know. But so they've been a great therapy for me. But so in Wyoming, we raised quarter horses. So we had a really cool stallion, and a couple mares, and we had foals and colts. And then I slowly started being responsible for starting those youngsters. Um, Looking back now, we started them kind of earlier than I would now. So they were probably 3 years old or 2.5 years old when we started them at the time. And I was deemed to be the lightest weight person in our family. So therefore, I had to get on first. And so
Makes perfect sense.
right? Totally, right? And so I decided after a lot of bad experiences to maybe try to work with them on the ground first before getting on and that kind of thing. And so I developed this kind of like, um, I just started really paying attention to horse behavior. I felt like they were paying attention to my behavior. And, so we kind of started building this little dance. And then later from there, I realized that there was people that did this for a living. That like I think the first one that I noticed was Monty Roberts, and I was like, "Hey, that's cool." And it kind of grew from there over time. And for a while, let's see, where was I? So we were in Wyoming. We're raising quarter horses. I'm starting colts a little bit. I'm starting to figure out that there's a lot of cool ways to train horses that don't have to be it doesn't have to be a submissive type of experience. It doesn't have to be a dominating thing. I'm not somebody who's very dominating in my personality, so it never really fit for me. Um, and so it was really cool to explore the natural horsemanship kind of world for a while. And then I started working on ranches. Working cows and working with different horses every day. And then I met a really cool guy. His name was Rick Broughton. He's no longer with us anymore, but he would take some of the Mustangs from the range and then train them up and use them on the ranch. And so I worked with him and I worked for him on his ranch and just saw some really awesome partnerships between horses and humans that I really appreciated in that kind of Western world. And then from there, the weather got too cold in DuBois, Wyoming. As it turns out, it's cold up there a lot of the
Mm.
time. So we moved to New Mexico from there. We still had some horses at the time. And then slowly I decided I wanted to go to school. Um, and I took quite a few years off from horses because I couldn't afford my rent, tuition, and my horses' rent. So I took some years off and then got back into horses after I settled down and ended up being able to buy a house and stuff. So there was like a 10-year gap there where
Mm.
I wasn't around horses at all, but I always wanted to be. It's not something that ever left me. I was pretty obsessed my whole life with them. So when it was time for me to pay for my horses, etc., I got back into it, and I actually picked up a mare that we had started as a young foal when we still had horses in Capitan, New Mexico. But she was pretty troubled. She had she just wasn't a very happy horse. And so she taught me a lot. She made me learn a lot. I think I always had a tiny bit of a natural ability to read horses, maybe a little bit, or maybe I was enough of a introvert, weird child that it kind of came naturally to me. But she taught me to really get educated and really start looking at methods and how could I really help her build trust, build confidence, build some respect for each other. Um, and we had an awesome partnership. It took us a while, but we got there. So I credit her for teaching me a ton. Um, and I credit her for having her take me back to dressage, back to some of those basics that I had learned in Europe. And she's the one who made me realize that some of the teachings that I had in Europe from one of the ladies that I really admired a lot was very French classical. And I didn't know the difference between any classical, anything, dressage. I just wanted to ride. So it didn't matter to me what they wanted to call it as a kid. But now looking back on it, she taught me a lot of very French classical techniques and philosophies that I was able to take back to this little mare Jessie. And we had a great time together. And then it kind of evolved from there. I started getting people asking me for help with their horses, and I would attempt to try to help, but I was learning as I was going. I still am learning. I feel like the more I know, the less I know, kind of thing. The more I
Hmm.
learn, the less I know. So there's a lot of learning going on all the time. Um, and so through people asking me to help them, I slowly gained a little bit of confidence in myself, I think, maybe, or just the realizations that um, you don't have to know everything in order to be helpful to somebody else. And
Hmm.
so it grew from there, and that's where cohesive horsemanship was born. So now it's a blend of French classical dressage and natural horsemanship and ranch work and whatever else I happen to throw in at the time, because I'm always studying something,
Hmm.
trying to bring it together for people to learn from. I mean, mostly for me to learn from. That's where it's kind of a selfish endeavor. I want to learn, and then it helps me learn if I teach, and so
Oh,
it's
I know how
it's
that goes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, definitely. Definitely. You find yourself in the rabbit hole and you're like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
how, sometimes people are like, well, you just got into this. How can you be teaching it? It's like, well, how can I not? I can't go and teach and pretend I don't know this now. Like,
Right.
it's this thing. It's now infiltrated my brain. So we just all got to float around together and figure it
Absolutely.
out.
And it's so fun to just keep learning. And it's like, and I find myself like in my next lesson, I'm like, oh, I just said what I just learned like yesterday. you know,
Yeah.
it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool journey for sure. Yeah.
No, I know working equitation is a thing that
Mm.
that you
Mhm.
are doing at this time.
Yeah.
Um, Working equitation is something I am drawn to because of how versatile and well-rounded I think it helps you be if that's what you need help with, and if you're already kind of there, then it gives you a place to celebrate it when it's not necessarily
Yeah.
always easy to find that.
Mhm.
Um, and I love the mix of writing styles and tack that you can do, which maybe for some people that's a little too weird, but for me, I think that's really awesome.
Right.
So, for people who are not familiar, can you fill us in on the sport and what you like about it?
Yeah. So working equitation originated in Europe in the kind of the traditions that work livestock. So a lot of European cultures also have this tradition of working livestock. And so they wanted to find some way that they could preserve their traditions and have these competitions. So that's where working equitation kind of originated. But it obviously makes a lot of sense when you think of the United States and the history of the States through all of our history, not just cattle, but just,
Mm-hmm.
all of it with the horse. It has a very nice tie to that. So, what working equitation is it has one trial. The first trial is all about dressage, but it's meant to be a way to show dressage for the working horse. So, having that adjustability, if you will, to move in different directions, but to still be a very good athlete. So, that's the dressage part. And in some ways, it does honor the traditional European dressage world, because that's where dressage kind of comes from. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing. And then the second trial is called ease of handling. And that's where you're going to kind of, in a sense, put your dressage to work with some obstacles. And the obstacles are meant to emulate what you might encounter while you're working any kind of livestock in the field. So you might have to jump over something, or you might have to be able to circle things, or you might have to open a gate and not let the cows out through that gate, or things like this. So they're not perfect, but they're meant to emulate some of that work that you might have to do while working livestock, while still maintaining that good biomechanics that you've established from your dressage work. And so that's the second trial. The third trial is speed. And so now you do your obstacle course at speed. And so the intent there is to have an equine that can get to something fast and then do a job. So not lose their mind because they're going super fast and not be able to open the gate, for example. And that if you've worked cattle, you've had to do that, right? You've had to get from point A to point B quickly, but still be able to work a cow or whatever needs to happen when you get there. And then lastly, the fourth trial, which is not always offered depending on the facility's ability to handle it, is actually working cows. And it's very similar in some ways to team penning. For those who are familiar with that, you're going to basically take a cow out of the herd and put it into another separate pen. And so what's cool about this, and you mentioned this, is that it is cross discipline. So you could be in a dressage saddle doing your dressage trial, which makes perfect sense. And then you go into your ease of handling trial and you're doing obstacles still in your dressage saddle. And then you're going to work cows in your dressage saddle. Or you could be in your Western attire and you do awesome dressage work in your Western attire. And then you do your obstacles and your cow work in your Western attire. So it's not judging the attire or the tradition that you come from, but are you still asking for proper biomechanics? Do you still have that adjustable equine? Can you still do all the work properly and well to compete together, which I personally think develops a really eclectic and holistic approach to horsemanship if it's done right. If it's done well.
I think it almost it requires that the judging kind of stay on the things that matter in a way, like it just wouldn't work any other way with having all those different styles come into the same class,
That's a very good point.
So, yeah, I like that. I like that piece of it. Now, like dressage and hunter jumpers, it's something that started in Europe and has made its way here, and we all know that things are different here versus there, and both sides have their own challenges and strengths and weaknesses and all of that. Right. How would you like to see the sport evolve here in the United States?
I think what's interesting in the United States, and I think is beautiful, is that we have a lot of amateur riders. We have a lot of people who have a horse maybe even later in life. It wasn't something that they grew up doing, or maybe they grew up doing and then they had to give it up for work and whatever life throws at us, and then they come back to horses a little bit later and they want to do something with their horse. And you have these people that are really passionate about doing really good work with their horses, but they're not professionals. They're not necessarily doing it for a living. They didn't necessarily grow up in a place where that's what they did. And so they're coming to work in equitation, looking for something great to do with their horses. And so we have this really cool community around work in equitation that is, and a lot of different, it doesn't have to be work in equitation, but this in general in the United States, I feel like there's this community that comes around horse sports that is not necessarily a bunch of professionals that are only riding at the higher levels, that are only demonstrating the top level of how to do dressage or Western dressage or whatever it is that you're competing in. There's all these different levels. And so I love seeing the people that might be riding at a small, like a lower level of work in equitation and making progress with their horse. It's like they now have something to work on between them and their horse that is good for their partnership. And that I think is pretty different than what you will find in some other places. And so what the United States is contending with now is that we need to grow this awesome sport, work in equitation, by really encouraging all these different levels to come and join the community and join the experience, and then still be able to have maybe a international team of top level riders that then can do the sport in different countries and compete on the world stage, if you will, and grow it that way. So some of the growing pains associated with that, which I'm sure occurred with dressage, with eventing, with anything, is we still need to be able to encourage the lower levels while promoting that higher level kind of worldwide kind of competitive team, and make the sport.
Without them just growing apart. It's
Correct.
like, and still growing this way, not this way. So, yeah.
Yeah, without one of them excluding the other somehow. It's
Hmm.
gotta, I think there's so much beauty in keeping that being still the same sport, the same events, and you have all these different levels that encourage each other to grow through that. So it's interesting to see how there's the rules for working equitation on the world stage, and there's the rules in the United States, and how we're developing those to match in certain areas and be
Hmm.
different in other areas where our culture might benefit more from it to be a little bit different.
Hmm.
It's cool. What I would like to see, okay, so that's, yeah. So what I would like to see is for all that to stay together,
Yeah.
because I think the upper levels inspire the lower levels, and it's a learning opportunity from both senses. And it's really cool to see some of those really top upper level riders come in on a green horse, let's say, and ride the lower levels and demonstrate that, yes, we all have to go through that learning process. And what I love about working equitation is it really gives a purpose to our training. And so I see horses do better in dressage now that they've had the obstacles to put purpose to some of that. I see riders take more interest in the biomechanical work now that they have to put it to work in the obstacles. And I've seen some dressage riders that are very technically correct in the biomechanics, perhaps, but suddenly challenge themselves with actually putting that to work with some obstacles where you don't have as precise of a navigation field that you have to be through. You have to make it as precise as you can in that instance, and
Hmm.
maybe you have to ride one-handed and open a gate, and that is
Mm.
challenging to different pieces or different places in our community, and that's fun to see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love that. Now, in working equitation, is it separated with professionals and amateurs? Like, is there a professional division, amateur division? You're never competing against each other, kind of thing. Is that how it's split
there
up?
is. Yeah, depending, some shows are small enough where they're going to keep everybody open, let's say, where, but very rarely does that happen anymore. Now it's
Hmm.
amateurs and open are going to be separated, and then there's a youth category as well. So,
Okay,
yeah,
and tell us what the levels are so
yeah,
that people can get an understanding
perfect.
of how beginner friendly it can be, but also how challenging and technical it can be.
It can get, yeah. So the first level, level one, introductory, is for horses that aren't cantering yet, or people who aren't cantering yet, or mules that aren't cantering yet, because we do have some really competitive mules. So I should say equines.
Yes.
Um, so it's really cool because the dressage pattern is going to be a little bit simpler, and you don't have that canter element in it. So it's walk trot. Then you are going to do some obstacles, and the obstacles are a little bit more simplified. So, for instance, you're not going to have a side pass. You won't see a backing L. You'll still have a backup, but maybe not the L piece of that backup. And at the introductory level, you won't ride speed. And if you think about that, that kind of makes sense. If you're not quite cantering that green horse yet, maybe speed is not the best idea yet, right? So you only do the first two trials. You do the dressage and the ease of handling. From there, level two, now we start to add the canter. So in your dressage test, you're going to have a 20-meter canter element. And then when you get to the obstacles, you start cantering between obstacles. So it's up to this is another cool part about working equitation, is it's up to the rider to strategize how they're going to get from one obstacle to the next. The obstacles are numbered, and then you as the rider in your course walk get to decide, okay, I'm going to take this line to get from the figure eight, let's say, to the bridge or something like that. That best sets you up for success as you get there
Hmm.
for your obstacle. So in those lines between obstacles at level two, you must show a canter. but you are still walking or trotting the actual obstacles themselves. Then when you get to level 3, you are now showing changes of leads through the trot. So your very basic kind of changes. So you're going to canter on the left lead, trot a couple steps, canter on the right lead kind of thing in your dressage test. And then in the ease of handling, you start cantering some of the obstacles. So not only do you have to canter between the obstacles, but now let's say the 3 drums or the figure 8, you will demonstrate that you can maintain the canter through those figures. Again, with that change through the trot. Then you get to level 4, and now you're changing your canter through the walk. So simple changes. New rule this year for the United States is that you can show flying changes. So if you're at that point where your horse can sometimes do them, but sometimes they're not set up quite well enough to do a nice flying change, you can still change through the walk, but you can also demonstrate that flying change if it's clean. But in that point at level 4, you are cantering all the obstacles. So the double slalom, the single slalom, those kinds of obstacles are all done at the canter. You get to level 5, and now you're doing flying changes. So all the obstacles or your dressage test, you have those flying changes in there. Level 6, you're one-handed. And
Okay.
at level 7, the obstacles get closer together. So the 3 drums become a little bit closer, for example. And you're choreographing your dressage test to music, which is fun.
Nice.
But you're showing a lot more of the advanced movements, such as canter pirouettes, half passes, that kind of thing. So you're advancing through those stages. And all the levels from level 2 to level 7 do the cattle trial, or I'm sorry, the speed trial. And if the cattle trial is offered, then the cattle trial as well.
So in that level 7, even in the dressage test, you are one-handed, even if you're in English tack?
Correct.
Nice. Cool.
Correct. Yeah.
That
That's
is
pretty cool.
definitely a fun challenge to
Yeah,
consider, huh?
totally.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
For working equitation, so specifically for Arizona, where I'm located, we have a great club that puts on quite a few shows throughout the state, throughout the year, both schooling shows and licensed shows. And then the national organization, so if you want to find out more about that, it's USAWE, so USAWE.org, to find out more about working equitation in the United States. And there's a lot of different shows, a lot of different schooling shows if you just want to try it, a lot of different license shows, and then they have some really cool awards at the end of the year for points that are accumulated throughout the year. And there's even regional and maybe someday a national show coming together. So very
And you
cool.
put on a series of shows in Payson, right?
I do, yeah. So right here in Payson, Arizona, I put on what's called the Rim Rider series. So there's 4 shows a year. And if riders do 3 of those, we take the highest scores and we have a belt buckle as one of the awards for that. And they're really fun. They're a really fun group of people here in Payson, Arizona. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I
Yeah.
look forward to attending some soon.
Yes, please.
Okay, now let's jump over to horse training
Mm.
stuff. Can you define what quality horsemanship means to you?
Mhm.
Um, and can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you and your horses?
Yeah. So, that question there's a lot to that when
I
you
know.
start thinking about it. Yeah. What is quality horsemanship? So to me, it's an art, first of all. Horsemanship really is something that has that artistic feel to it, where there's not necessarily a right or a wrong sometimes, and it's a feel, right? So what is quality horsemanship? To me, it's where you can see a human and an equine willingly working together. Both of them have incredible amount of mutual trust. They have incredible mutual confidence in each other and in their environment and the relationship they've built. And they have a ton of mutual respect. And so good horsemanship to me is demonstrated by a human and an equine being able to try lots of different things, knowing that that base education, that base language that they have together is solid enough that they just trust each other through it. They have that confidence, they have that respect, and they can dance together. And sometimes it feels like there's just one being doing that dance, even though there's a horse and a human. So to me, that's quality horsemanship. And sometimes it's hard for me to describe it that way because it's a little bit nebulous. But what I can say is it's not forceful. It's not about obedience in my mind. It's not about dominance. It's really about two willing beings coming together for a dance in a lot of ways. That's quality horsemanship for me.
Beautiful. Love it. So, as riders, we have to interpret how our horses feel, whether that's mentally or physically. What are some ways that horses tell you what they need or how they feel? Obviously, that is unique, so you can refer to your own horses or you can talk about things that you help clients with. There's different answers, certainly.
Yeah. I think one thing that I try to always keep in mind and I try to teach is that horses can't speak. They can't say words. So they have to communicate through their body language. It's the only way that they know how to speak, right? How to say anything. So it's really important for us to be really good observers of body language and to really start to study it and understand it when we see our horses doing something. And sometimes that body language can be big and dramatic. It's behavior, right? But that's how they're communicating with us. And really, to be honest, I look at humans interacting with each other, and we do that with each other, right? We're always watching each other. And if we're good at reading other people, we know what body language means for each other too. And some people are better at it than others, maybe. But that's the same with our horses. And if we can really study that and look at it, and in a lot of ways, all it takes is acknowledging that we see a behavior or we see a movement or something that's being said to us from our horse. We don't even have to necessarily understand it. If we acknowledge that, oh, I saw that. Why are you flicking your ear towards me right now? Just acknowledging that can change the conversation between you and your horse. And so just those little things. But so the ear example, to get tactical, I guess. Obviously, if the ear comes towards you, a lot of times that can mean that they're paying attention to you to some extent. There's something that, okay, you've got their attention. If they're not even acknowledging your presence, you don't have much attention there. So you may have to get creative to figure out a way to ask them to maybe pay attention to you a little bit. But things like, being able to see if a horse is blinking, are they breathing, or are they just holding their breath with some tension? Just the classic signs of relaxation. Are they blowing out? Are they licking their lips? Are they able to relax through their body a little bit? And then there's things that you can see that might be a little bit subtle, but are they holding tension in their rib cage? Are they not able all of a sudden to move their rib cage from right to left when you're riding or when you're on the ground? Are they all of a sudden stiff through the neck? That could be signs of anxiety, of tension, of not feeling good through their body, or maybe mentally they're kind of stuck. And so pay attention to those kinds of things so that you can help them find some form of relaxation or some form of release within that through their body. There's a quote that I think it was Andrew Huberman who said that you can get to the mind through the body. And it's meant for humans, right? We can get to our mind by moving our body sometimes, but I think it's very true with our horses too, is we can help get to the horse's mind a little bit if we can get through their body to some way or another. And it doesn't mean that we have to run them around. it might just mean that you can ask them to take a soft step or move that rib cage over, or, whatever it might be to help relax them. Is that tactical enough, or do you want me to go into?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love that you brought up, you don't have to know what it means. You don't have to
Mhm.
know all the details. A lot of times in the noticing, it is the noticing in itself that is going to really be what you needed in the first place.
Yes, yes.
It's not about necessarily expertise, although, yeah, sometimes we need expertise and we need the help and we need the details, but a lot of times that answer is in just taking the time to notice. And as you say often, get curious.
Yes, yes, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
what are some ways that you and your horses are currently excelling,
Mm.
and what would you like to improve upon?
Oh my gosh, there's so much.
We've got all day.
Right? Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier, but it's like the more I learn, the more I study, the less I know. It's incredible. Um, and I'm learning so much. It's such a cool journey to just kind of dive into different rabbit holes at different times and just see where that leads you. It's just really fun. So recently, I guess the past couple years, I've been very interested in French classical dressage. And I've been studying a lot of Philippe Carl. He's the École de Légèreté, so the School of Lightness kind of man. But at the same time, he's got me very interested in biomechanics. And it's so cool now because we've had so many studies with the horse's body that we know more about, how the body works in us as humans and with horses. So that part is absolutely fascinating for me. And I'm seeing some really cool things. So one of my horses is a little black Morgan, and he does have the gated gene. And so, for instance, flying changes are really difficult for him. Piaffe, pretty difficult for him. So it's been really cool to take him and talk to him about his body in different ways, using different, just kind of digging through different, maybe old text or even new stuff, and just seeing where can we unlock some differences for him to find different ways of using his body. And it's so cool to see horses that are not necessarily naturally gifted, naturally athletically super talented, and be able to talk to them about their body and work through things, and all of a sudden get these extraordinary movements. It's like building that extraordinary athlete through lots of work, perhaps, but it's so cool to see them be able to do that, especially if it's done well. You can see them like it, you know. And even Ridge now, when he's playing with his buddies, he's like he trots better on his own. He's got a better little canter away from my stallion or whatever. So it's fun to see him use his body differently, even on his own, um, and stay really sound and find those different movements. So for me, especially now, so this could be a huge tangent, but we in this modern world, we have developed a horse that did not exist like in the time of Steinbreck or of even Baucher, right? There's horses now that have the athletic ability that we have concentrated through breeding that did not totally exist back in the old times. So we have these amazing athletes that can do a lot of things. And I think in some ways that allows us to have poor training methods and still get really great results. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I may
Yes,
have seen this a time or two.
right, right. And it's unfortunate
Yeah.
because I think we're losing some of those really cool techniques. But if you can take that horse that's not super athlete bred awesomeness, right, and
Mm-hmm.
make them the best they can be or the best athlete they can be, to me that is so much more rewarding and it's so cool. But you kind of have to have better training methods. You have to be aware of what you're training, and that's cool too, right? To
Mm-hmm.
really know why and how you're doing it and when to do it and how it works and what's the evolution. Like if you were going to train a gymnast, right? You need to, as a human body, you need to be able to progressively build that strength and that flexibility and that agility to do that. And mentally, you have to be able to do it too. And it's, for me, it's the same when we're developing a horse. We're developing an athlete, and we have to be cognizant of why we do what, when, and how. So that's
Yeah,
a big one
and
for me.
when they're so ridiculously athletically gifted, it's more like stay out of their way and shape it a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, and you never have to dive in
Right.
that deep. It's definitely some different things that I learned from my Mustangs and from having the experience of getting that like problem horse and horsemanship thing going on. You get so many different breeds and types that I didn't work with prior,
Yes.
and man, you learn some lessons, and it is some of the most like beautiful stuff too. Once you learn to appreciate what you're seeing, if your eye has only learned how to see that like freak of nature animal, yeah, it's hard to watch what we might be doing with a little
Yes.
dress, little stocky type horse. It's hard to
Totally.
appreciate it a little bit until you've been there, and then you're like, oh wow, look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So that
Totally.
is cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've kind of gone there a little bit, but let's go a little farther. What kind of lessons have horses helped you to learn
Oh
out of the
goodness.
saddle?
Out of the saddle. So I was a shy, scared kid, generally speaking. That's how I would describe myself in a lot of ways. And socially really uncomfortable and like kind of self-conscious, all those things. And it's really horses that helped me build some confidence and um, figure out that I could be in tune with myself and all those things that we talk about. But it was even later. I worked for the Forest Service for about 22 years, and I worked in fire, in wildland fire, and I ended up working with a lot of groups of really cool, highly functioning people that work in an emergency environment. So they're type A generally. They're really go-getters, right? Very accomplished people. And I am not a type A individual. I am not an extrovert, all these things. But I found myself in that world, and it really taught me a lot about leadership. But the reason I think I did so well in that context was because of the lessons that horses had taught me. And some of that had to do with, you know, if you are going to trust a horse, you are putting yourself in a slightly vulnerable position, especially if you're willing to trust a horse without having a manipulative training method that is coercive, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that ability to be a little bit vulnerable and understand that that opens doors that you may have never experienced before is something that horses taught me. And that has served me so well through my career, through learning to trust people, learning to trust myself, right? And just going through life as a happier, more confident person without having this baggage over me that I don't know where that came from really, but it did. It was there. And horses
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that really helped me through that. So I don't know. Maybe that's a little woo woo, but I think
No.
they're the biggest therapists I know of
Yeah.
are my work with horses for sure. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned one of your corner turner horses earlier.
Jesse.
Are there any other corner turners as far as people or events that change the trajectory of your life with horses or your life outside of horses?
Yeah, I looked back. You sent me that question, and it was pretty interesting for me to ponder it a little bit. Um, and it goes back. Even my, so I had this woman that I really admired in Europe, and I was a kid, so I was just kind of obsessed because she worked in her profession was working with horses. She was a trainer. She had gone to learn in some school in Canada that I don't even know if it still exists, and I don't know anything about it, to be honest, but I thought it was super cool that she had done that. And so she was kind of my hero as a kid. Her name was Edith, but she was the one who inserted some French classical dressage into my early education of horses without me ever even realizing that's what she was doing. And looking back on it, I realized that she had a huge impact on the way I consider horses. And so at the time, it wasn't like a corner at the time.
Mhm.
But now looking back on it, it was definitely a huge, huge corner for me to go around. It was her. And then after that, Rick Broughton, that I mentioned, the rancher in Wyoming, was a big corner turner for me. He took these Mustangs and was able to train them in a way that was really awesome. Um, there was not this fight, not it was very different the way that he approached the way he trained horses, especially different from what I grew up with my stepfather, which was very dominating, very you will and shall do this and do it well, or, kind of attitude in general in life. And Rick was not that way. And somehow he did more with horses and had better results than anybody I'd ever seen. And so that was a big, big turning point for me as well. And then obviously Jessie taught me so much. So she's the horse that really took me far and asked me to study. And she not only asked me to study for her, but she awakened that passion to learn. And so now I can't get enough. It's like if I could do anything and just be a student, that would be the best. I would love to just be a student all the time. Um, that would be super. So she's the one who awakened that. And so yeah, so those are some huge mentors. And now Philippe Caro is a big mentor. But it changes, you learn a little bit more, and the impact that those people have had on your life, or those horses that have had on your life, it changes the meaning of that impact over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's why I like the term corner turner so much because
Yeah.
I feel like it's like you could have ended up like way over there,
Yeah.
but it's like the right corners keep setting me up to get to that
Mhm.
next corner or that next door. They all stack on themselves a little bit. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, here's the most important question.
Uh-oh.
So, if your fairy godmother granted you three horse related
Oh
wishes,
gosh.
what would you wish for?
I I would love to, so this is not possible, but this would be so cool. I would love to take like some of the old masters. Let's take Steinbreck, let's take Boucher, let's take all these really cool old masters, and then let's take like Nuno Oliveira, let's take Mark Russell, let's take some of these kind of newer, or Bettina Drummond or something like that. Let's put them all together, and then let's take even some of us now, not me personally, but maybe like Patrick King or somebody who's a really accomplished.
We can all be us's. We're all us's here, okay?
We're all us's, but like some of, I'm gonna call them the um, modern. You can't, it's like in art. If you're a painter, you don't get to be a master until you die, right? So
Mhm.
in horsemanship, in some ways, it's the same. It's like the artists are not recognized as artists overall until after they've unfortunately left us, and then it's like, oh my gosh, they were the best. And it's like, well, yeah, they were when they were alive too, but um,
Yeah.
so take some of these cool people now, and put them all together and have them like do a big like expo where they discuss things and share philosophies and work through things with horses and show things and talk about why and how. And I just want to audit. I just want to be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
That's,
and I think what you mentioned about modern horses too. Let's have the
yeah.
conversation with what modern horses are like, and
Mhm.
what a lot of times in those things they're working with the horses they have. Like, let me see them work with a Mustang and a
Yes.
Morgan and you know what I
Right.
mean, and an
Right.
Arabian. I want to see it all. I would pay a
Yes.
lot of money for this expo, Tessa. Just
Yes.
no.
I think it would be pretty cool. It'd be
Yes,
super cool.
maybe with AI.
You're
No,
right.
that's getting a little. It's getting a little
Yeah.
controversial, but maybe with AI, we're not
Yeah.
as far off as we think.
That's
So,
true. I didn't even
anyway,
think of that.
anyway.
Hmm.
Okay, I don't know if that count. I get that counts as just one wish. So we got
Is
two
it? Is there
more.
just one? Oh my
But
gosh.
no, there's two more. You got two more. What
I
else?
got two more.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go. I want my fairy godmother to send me to. I want to go to Mongolia. I want to go to Asia. I want to hit all the traditional horse cultures and
Mm,
learn from them. Yeah.
okay.
So we're going to do a world tour
Okay.
and learn about all the different horse cultures around the world. That would be
If
another.
you're training AI on your world tour, you can
Mhm.
write it all off.
I am.
Perfect.
Maybe you're my fairy godmother.
I have a lot of ideas
I
anyway,
love
but
it.
I don't know how to do that with an AI, but I
Yeah,
have
right.
ideas.
Yeah, don't ask me either, but
Okay, all right, you got one
yeah.
more wish. What do we got?
Okay, one more. One more. Let me think. Hmm. Don't you ever kind of wish, horses communicate through like to each other. It's like they don't have to even do anything and they can feel each other. There's something going on there energetically that we don't totally understand and maybe we shouldn't. I don't know, but it's it's something that is obviously beautiful and they obviously communicate with each other at a different level. I want that. I want to be able to communicate at that level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that means you have to be a horse for a little while. Maybe that's
Yeah.
technically what the wish is. You get to
Do you
be a
think AI can
horse.
do that? Can they make me a horse?
Why not? Why not?
Let's try it.
Let's do it in that order, though, so you become a horse after the tour and after
Yeah.
the AI bots are all finished
Hmm.
and all that.
Hmm. Okay.
Perfect. Well, before we go, tell us a little bit about your. I know you have some online
Hmm.
courses and whatnot for people that aren't here in Arizona and don't get to work with you in that way. So tell us about those a little bit, and while you're at it, tell us how they can find you.
Okay. Well, everything I do mostly is on my website, and that's cohesivehorsemanship.com. And so you can find my events and all that stuff. And then on there, there's also, I have a little Cohesive Horsemanship network where there's a monthly membership where we inspire each other and focus on something specific for a month. And that's been super fun. That's kind of a newer thing that I've been trying, Tamara, and I love it. I have my little group of people, and we learn so much from each other, and it's just fun. So that's
You do that on Zoom?
yeah. So we have a lesson per month that we all talk about, and then once a month we meet for a coaching call via Zoom, and so we talk about what we're experiencing, what we're finding, and then once a week I send out like an email, and it's meant to be inspirational. It's probably junk mail, but it's fun. And, so that's
Inspirational junk mail. Ah, yes.
yes,
Google
yes,
needs that as a filter. Thank you.
perfect. Yep. So we do that, and then I also have some full courses. One of them is meant to go over the foundations, so kind of the work that I do when I start horses and the foundations I'm looking for in my horses. And then after that, I go into a course that is more about developing the athlete, both as the human and the horse. And so that's another online course I have. So yeah, that's the basis. Otherwise, I travel for clinics and I love teaching. It's a passion. Um, I love learning more, but I love teaching too. So there's all of that put together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love
Awesome.
people. I love horses and I love people. So it's
You
good.
know what? That's actually a rare statement, I feel like, to hear from
Mhm.
horse people. Don't you think? I feel
think
like
it's
a lot
true.
of times it is people like, the clients just come with them. Got to deal with them. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So that's
yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
That is lovely.
I
That's why
have to
people love
learn
you so much, Tessa.
that. I just find people so cool. Everybody has their journey, their story, their experiences, and there's value in that. It's huge. Yeah, just like a horse, right? They all have it's awesome. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was
You.
fun.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Visit TamaraLeeBarrett.com for more info and links to our socials. Remember to click follow or subscribe, rate the show, and share with a friend. Until next time, happy horsing.